Have you ever wondered why you don't run the same time every time you sprint? So not necessarily year upon year, but even within the same season itself, and even perhaps within the same running session, and I'm also talking within tenths, not hundredths, why is it that we don't run the same time every time we sprint? For example, how come athlete A ran 11.1 last week, but then this week run 11.3? Why is there a 2/10 difference? Why did athlete B, for example, run 10.49 last week, but then this week run 10.75? So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the factors that cause these natural fluctuations that I'm talking about. What are the factors that cause us to have times that are kind of up and down at points, or times that are sometimes faster, sometimes slower? Some of these factors are controllable, some of them are uncontrollable, some of them are internal, some of them are external. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more about this, then keep watching. Hi guys, and welcome back to Fit with T. I hope you guys are good. Yes, the jacket is back. It's cold again, so this year we're doing pink. This is another video in my Sprint and ABC series, and today we're on the letter V and we're talking about variability. So variability is a natural part of sport, okay? It's any sport that you do, but this is Fit with T, so I'm going to be talking primarily about sprinting, about track and field, about running, right? And so when it comes to this sport, you're going to see fluctuations in your performance and in your sprinting. So it's natural for an athlete, if you were to look at your whole season, look at your fastest time, look at your slowest time, they're not always exactly the same. There's usually a few tenths between them, maybe even a second between them, right? Depending on where you're at in your journey as a whole. Of course, we're going to train to try to minimize those fluctuations as much as possible, to try and take control of the things that we can control as much as possible. And that's part of what makes the elite athletes, those that are the best in the world, that consistency, that ability to be consistent is part of what makes them elite in the first place, right? The ability to run fast all season round, the ability to execute consistently, to perform consistently, to have quite consistent time. Of course, we train to try and progress our performance, to try and get faster, but also we're training to be consistent, okay? Because there's going to come a point where it's not always easy to get personal best all the time, but part of progression is actually being consistent in your ability to run fast more often. So now it's raining, so I'm going to have to move my camera. Just thought I'd show you guys the rainbow. Like I was saying, of course we train to progress our sprinting to get faster, but part of progression is also actually becoming more consistent at running faster more regularly. So being able to execute better, so that your timed performances are actually consistently fast as opposed to one-hit wonders. But even at the top level of the sport, you still do see those fluctuations in performance. And like I said, some of those factors that cause these fluctuations are controllable, but some of them are not controllable. So if you want to become a master sprinter, one of the things you're going to have to do is get good at controlling the controllables. But then when it comes to the uncontrollables, being aware of those so that you're not put down every time you don't necessarily run as fast as you want to run, right? So what are 5 uncontrollable variables that can affect your sprinting performance? So let's start off with talking about the one that has so rudely interrupted my recording so far today already, and that is the weather, okay? So if you're new to the sport, then it won't be long before you find out that the weather truly does affect your sprinting performance, your ability to run fast. First and foremost, as sprinters, we like warm weather, our muscles like warm weather. You're gonna fire quicker when your muscles are warm, when it's hot, right? So hot weather is the more preferable weather when it comes to sprinting. For long distance runners, endurance runners, they may prefer cooler weathers because they're going for much longer and they don't want to overheat. But as a sprinter, warm weather is actually better for you. So if you're blessed to live in a country that's hot, it's much easier to be able to sprint all year round, to be able to implement speed all year round. Whereas if you live in a country, you know, like London, where it's notorious for being cold and rainy and grey, then I have to be honest, we've had summer in October, which is unusual. But anyway, if you do live in a country where the seasons change and it gets quite cold, it can be much more difficult to maintain high speeds in cold temperatures. That's why athletes who live in countries like I do go on warm weather training, where you can actually go to hotter countries to train where it's warmer, warm weather training, so that you can actually make use of warm weather to be able to maintain high intensity sessions, higher speed sessions. You'll find athletes who are sponsored or more elite may stay in other countries for long periods of time, but as someone who's maybe not so far up, hasn't got a sponsor, stuff like that, or maybe working or studying, you may just go away for a few weeks at points in the season, pre-season, before the outdoor season starts. Whether it's training or competitions, if it's cold, it's going to be much harder to run fast. If you haven't seen my video about my winter training vlog, then check it out and you'll see what I'm talking about. Wind is another factor that plays a big part in how fast you run, because if the wind is in your face, you're not going to run as fast as you would do if the wind is behind you. I've got a whole video about headwinds and tailwinds. So if you haven't checked out this video, I encourage you to check it out, where I go into detail as to what legal winds are, headwinds, tailwinds, wind and the whole shebang. Weather is an uncontrollable factor, right? But it does influence how fast you can run on that day. And so do take that into account when you're in training, when you're in competition, when you look at someone's performance online in terms of just the time. It doesn't tell you what the weather was that day. It may tell you whether the wind was in your face or behind you. However, even that sometimes in competitions the wind is swirling, so it may say a wind that actually the athlete knows the conditions that day was not what it is saying on that thing, right? You have to take that into consideration when you're trying to analyze your time, trying to analyze the fluctuations in your performance. Take the weather into account. So another uncontrollable factor you have to take into account is the track itself, okay? The track conditions, okay? Because not all tracks are created equal, and if you've been doing this sport long enough, you will know that for sure. Where I personally train, the track has not been relayed in I don't know how many years. There's potholes, there's lumps, air holes, there's all that stuff. A track like that compared to a newly laid Mondo track, you're not going to run as fast on the old track with potholes and lumps and bumps, right? So you can't do anything about it, especially if it's a competition. If it's training, if that's your home track, that's your home track, you're going to train. Some of these factors you have to think more about performance as opposed to the time itself, okay? So how did you execute? Other ways to analyze your performance as opposed to just the time itself, right? But the point is that track conditions can make a difference as to how fast you run. How many times have you watched athletes online, whether you watch the Diamond League or a major championship, and then the person interviewing the athlete after the race will be like, oh, what do you think about the track? Was it a fast track? Oh yeah, the track is fast. Or you see everyone seems to be running quick that day. It could have something to do with the track itself. Is it a fast track? Is it a harder track? A harder track, you're more likely to run quicker than maybe a soft track that absorbs some of your force. So similarly, this one is more so for competition in terms of fluctuation. Not all warm-up areas are created equal either. Like sometimes they literally give you a few meters to be able to warm up. Sometimes you have the back straight, sometimes it's very crowded competition, and so you can't do necessarily all the things you necessarily normally do in training or at a bigger competition, and so you've got to take these things into account. Basically, the facilities can make a difference as to how well you're able to prepare yourself in that competition. So another thing, again, this is competition related, is actually the blocks. Blocks in a competition you can't always control. So in a lower league competition, maybe you can use your own blocks, but as you get up the rank and if you go up national, international, you're going to have to use the blocks that are provided. And not all blocks are created equal. Again, I keep saying that phrase because it's true. Some blocks can mess up your settings because the way that you've practiced your settings, whether it's like 2 feet, 3 fingers, 1 finger, and the notches are not the same distance, it can throw you off a little bit, right? But it's taking these things into consideration, maybe playing with your block settings and training where we can have it a little bit back, a little bit forward, and sometimes the levels up are not the same. So one level up on your normal block is like 2 on another block. So it's really being aware of the feelings of your block start so you're not so thrown off by these kind of variables. So these are things to take into consideration. I'm just trying to give you guys ideas and to make you aware of things that can affect your performance, that you can make adjustments for it, and so that you can take it into consideration when you're trying to think, oh, what went wrong? Why was it different? Why did I not run as fast? Or why did I run quicker? Stuff like that, right? Number 5, what I'm going to say for this video, of course there's more things, but I'm just going to give you 5, is actually the competition itself. So the level of competition and your competitors, because the reality is, why do you think world-class athletes, elite level athletes, why do you think they try to run on the circuit, what we say the circuit? Why do you think they try to run in fast races? Because the reality is, if you're running against other athletes who are fast, you're more likely to run fast. If you're running against people that are more at your level, you're more likely to run at your level, at the best of your level, right? So if you run with someone who's a little bit faster, it's likely to push you, but if someone's way ahead of you, it's not necessarily going to push you, it might be demotivating. Or if you're running with athletes who are actually not as quick as you, again, it's going to be very difficult to challenge yourself by yourself. It's the same with running by yourself. If you have training partners, it helps you to be competitive more regularly, as opposed to if you're someone like me who trains alone, it can be quite difficult to run at the same level. And so you utilize outside things like timing gates and stuff like that to try and help you have that same sort of competitiveness, although it's not the same. It's really beneficial to have training partners because you can push each other consistently. So take these into consideration. When you're planning your race schedule, try to look for races that are, at your level, races that are going to push you, different types of levels, because the level of the competition can make a difference. Maybe even whether there's electronic timing or hand timing, and that can make a difference in your time. Also, it can make a difference mentally, how nervous you feel and stuff like that. So this now is moving us on to the internal factors, right? So when it comes to variables that can affect your performance, I've spoken about some of the uncontrollables, but when it comes to the controllables, you want to be able to get good at controlling the controllables. So things like how nervous you feel on a competition day, how you prepare yourself for a competition, right? And these are things that you want to think about, because if you're too nervous, you're not likely to run run as fast. You're probably not likely to sleep as well prior to the competition. If you're tired, you're not likely to run as fast. All of these things actually have a knock-on effect. So if you think about the things you can control, such as your execution of your race, if you're going to do 100, 200, 400, whatever race you're going to do, think about your race plan. That's what you focus on, as opposed to the things you can't control. Who's going to be there? How fast are you going to run? The outcome. Focus on the things that you can control, okay? Especially in the lead up to your race. So if you haven't seen this video or this video where I give you guys some pre-meet tips, some preparation tips in the lead up to your competition, in the lead up to your race, then I really encourage you to check that video out. And I've also got a free download that goes along with that. The link is in the description box. So make sure to check out the 2 videos and get the download and read it. And I'll see you guys on another Friday. Bye guys.